They say blood is thicker than water, ... But sometimes it's actually the tide that sets you free. At 78 years old, Vivian Harmon had learned to live with silence. The kind of silence that hums in empty hallways, echoes in teacups left half-filled, and creaks with the lonely chill of a too-big bed. Once her house had burst with laughter, with Sunday dinners, grandchildren's squeals, and kisses from a man who had loved her fiercely for over 5 decades. Now, it was just her and the ticking of the grandfather clock that once stood proudly in the foyer I reduced to a backdrop for a life. Gone unnarrated. Vivian never expected betrayal to come not with a stranger's name but with her own son's. It was one of those ordinary skit Sundays when everything changed. She had just finished pruning the marigolds in her garden when her phone rang. It was David, her only child. Their weekly call, polite, predictable, punctual. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice distant, as always, distracted like he was replying to emails while asking her how the hibiscus had fared this season. He asked about her garden club and if she'd finished that painting she'd mentioned last week. She answered with habitual softness, grateful for the crumbs of conversation, even if they tasted like pity. But this time, David forgot to hang up. And what Vivian heard next was a moment that would unspool her entire reality. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was her granddaughter Iris's bright voice, mocking and sharp. Did she fall for it? Hook, line, and sinker, David had replied, cold as steel. "She'll sign the house over soon." They laughed. David, Natalie, Tyler, Iris, her family. Talking about placing her in somewhere affordable after draining her accounts, scussing her like a pawn on a board they were engineering. "Mom's too stupid to see what's going on," he had said. And then he laughed. And every brittle suspicion she'd ever dared to suppress became damning, undeniable truth. Vivian sat frozen in her kitchen, porcelain teacup poised midair. That garden she once took solace in now seemed to wither by association. This wasn't just betrayal. This was heartbreak, wearing the face of love, before a single tear could fall. Vivian did something no one expected a quiet widow of 78 to do. She blocked every one of their numbers. She called her bank, then her lawyer, and for the first time in decades, she put herself first. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because to understand the weight of her courage, you must first understand the softness she was forced to carve it from. Before we go deeper into Vivian's unraveling and rebuilding, make sure to subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet strength in all of us. If this story is already touching your heart, leave a comment and share where you're watching from. Has someone you loved ever revealed a side you didn't expect? Share your moment of awakening. We're listening. Vivian Harmon wasn't a fool. Not really. But she did believe in family. After her husband Hector passed 5 years earlier, everything in her world bent around the vacancy he left. Vivian hadn't just lost a partner. She had lost the anchor that kept her moored. David had been the one to step up poor, at least to appear to. He called every week, set up her move when the stairs in the old house became too much for her knees. Reminded her to take her vitamins. He promised she wouldn't be alone. She believed him. She changed her will like he'd suggested just to make things easier, she thought. She lent money when Iris said she needed it for rent. She invested in Tyler's can't-fail tech startup. She wrote checks in exchange for hugs, gifts, because someone called her sweet grandma again. No one told her this was how it would go. That grief makes you soft. That kindness in the wrong hands wounds you twice. Vivian's days took on a rhythm. Tea in the morning, watercolor in the studio Hector built. Garden club on Tuesdays, art class on Thursdays. And always Sunday calls, where David asked about the same things with the same tone. Never once noticing if her answers shifted, if her voice quieted, if her strength thinned. But she noticed. She saw how Natalie lingered near the silver tea set inherited from her mother. How Tyler said, "Shouldn't this painting hang in our living room someday?" Holding one of her prized watercolors. How Iris called only when she needed money, validation, more. Still, she brushed it aside. They were family. Family meant helping until. Helping felt like hemorrhaging Dot. Then came Milo's. He was unexpected and old-world gentleman from Serbia, who'd once engineered bridges and now asked her to dance at a community center mixer. He smiled at her like youth hadn't left them, and told her she painted light like someone who had loved very deeply. Vivian hadn't blushed in years. They met on Wednesdays at the museum. Cooked Serbian recipes on Saturdays. She dared to laugh. Again, dared to feel visible. David disapproved. "You barely know this guy, Mom. He could be after your money." The words rang out, heavy with projection. So Vivian ended things with Milo's. Because guilt, and trained over time, is harder to silence than instinct. But after that call, the call she was never supposed to hear, everything shifted. She no longer saw herself as the burden in the narrative they had written for her. She saw herself as the author of an entirely new story. And in that quiet awakening, Vivian Harmon, widow, mother, grandmother, survivor, made a choice. She would no longer be the background to someone else's entitlement. She would no longer apologize for aging, for grieving, for hoping to be loved. She would live what was left with integrity, without permission, with new colors no one else had picked. After that sunrise of awakening, Vivian didn't rush. She knew from decades of life that the strongest structures weren't built in haste, but in intention. So she took her time meticulously unraveling the web they had spun around her thread by thread. Silently. The first step had been practical, logical, safeguarding what remained. She pressed her reading glasses down on her nose, opened her laptop, and began changing every password. Bank accounts, email, streaming apps. She removed David's access to her financial records, a privilege she'd given him out of trust, not necessity. She made a list of all credit cards with family authorized. Then took a pair of scissors, sharp and symbolic hand, cut them in half. One by one, each snip echoed in her chest, not with regret, but with clarity. Then came the lawyer. Vivian hadn't used an attorney since Hector's will was read. But her older sister Zane, always wiser than anyone cared to admit, had a trusted contact, Janet Kowalski. Sharp, direct, with kindness behind the eyes. "People never think it's the ones closest to them," Janet said, taking notes, eyes flicking up from the legal pad. "But unfortunately, family exploitation is the most common kind. They feel entitled to what you've earned." Vivian nodded. Hands clutched a worn file folder with records and statements, a lifetime reduced to financial printouts. "I just want to protect what's left. My little house, my pension. Hector's life insurance. My paintings. I want it to go where it matters. If not to them, then to something that honors my life." Janet helped create a new revocable living trust. One that removed David as beneficiary executor. One that placed everything under Vivian's name. And purpose, with Xenia appointed to oversee it if Vivian ever became ill. She reviewed every clause, every account. She was not just untangling a betrayal. She was reclaiming herself. "Vivian," Janet said gently, handing her a pen. "You're doing the right thing." Vivian signed, the ink drying like locked in tension, and still she told no one. Let them think she was still asleep. Let them believe. She remained tangled in the fog of love and guilt. 4 days later, she called the realtor who had once helped her downsize to the small rancher. "I'm considering something smaller," she said with a polite smile. Inside, she added silently, something freer. And that's how she found Oakwood Village, a retirement community on the edge of town. Vibrant, safe, independent. Vibrant art program, garden plots, walking paths. A reading room with real wood shelves and chairs that made you want to sit a while. Residents who greeted her with sincere smiles, not calculating eyes. This would be perfect for morning painting sessions. She whispered aloud, standing beside the east-facing window of a studio apartment. The leasing agent smiled. This one becomes available in 2 weeks. Shall I put your name in? Voice was steady. Yes, please. When she told Xenia everything that night about the trust, the phone call, the move, the older woman poured 2 glasses of red wine without a word. Then she hugged Vivian fiercely. I should have told you. Sooner, Xenia said gruffly. But you had to see it for yourself. Kate? Oh, she had seen it. She wasn't running. She was choosing. And that difference changed everything. Vivian spent the next week making quiet arrangements. She donated half her furniture, shredded outdated documents, kept only what sparked real joy or memory. She called the security service to organize a discreet move. She forwarded her mail to a P.O. box downtown, changed her phone number, switched her email, told no one in the family not a word. David kept calling. Natalie texted sweet photos of the kids as if nothing had happened. But Vivian didn't reply. The night before the moving van arrived, she stood in her kitchen one last time. The house was hollow now, stripped of false memories. Only the grandfather clock remained, boxed. And, ready? She placed her hand on it. You'd be proud, my love. She whispered to Hector because even now she spoke to him in quiet moments, his absence still a comforting rhythm in her soul. You always said I was stronger than I thought. That night she slept at Xenia's. The next morning she closed the door to the house her son wanted to steal, and stepped into her future with the poise of a woman who had finally remembered her worth. She didn't cry, she didn't flinch, she simply painted her next chapter. With colors of her own choosing, Oakwood Village was nothing like she expected it. Wasn't a place people came to give up, it was where they came to begin. Her neighbors were retired pilots and teachers, bakers and biologists. Some had loved long and lost deeply. Others were childless by choice, freshly single, or still chasing dreams with wrinkled determination. You're the new artist everyone's whispering about, said Elaine, a graceful woman in her 70s who taught yoga by the rose garden. I hear your landscapes feel like memory. Vivian smiled shyly. I suppose I've lived some. The days found a rhythm she could claim as her own without interruption. Mornings were for painting, afternoons for books or gardening. Evenings might hold community theater, slow dancing in the courtyard, or occasionally a phone call from Milo's. Yes, Milo's. She had written him a letter, one last brushstroke of courage, and mailed, ate with trembling hands, apologizing, explaining, hoping he called a week later. Do they still play Sinatra there? He asked. She smiled through her tears. Every Wednesday. I take a dance class nearby, he said softly. I'll see you there. And she did. The first time he took her hand again, his palm was warm with forgiveness. They danced as strangers who remembered love, not as exes rehashing pain. It was enough for now. Vivian flourished. Really flourished. The studio by her window filled with new works. The garden outside bloomed with bursts of color she hadn't dared to plant in years. She began giving beginner watercolor classes in the activity room, art for the stiff-fingered but brave, she called it. The community embraced her, not despite her age, because of it. Because wisdom wasn't just something you earned, it was something you shared. For the first time since Hector's death, she was not defined by loss, she was defined by strength. And then he came, David, unannounced, standing in the lobby of Oakwood Village on a Thursday afternoon, holding a bouquet of lily, her favorite. His hair combed, his eyes carrying all the drama of a man caught in a story finally slipping out of his control. Vivian met him in the community lounge. She did not invite him upstairs. Mom, he started, his voice performing worry. You disappeared. We've been so worried. She looked at him long, at the child she once soothed to sleep, at the man who called her stupid without knowing she was still listening. I think you know why, she said quietly. I don't. He lied, she continued, voice calm, deliberate. You forgot to hang up, David. I heard everything, all of it. The house, the money, the things you said about me. He froze. for the first time in perhaps a decade. David didn't have words that could reframe reality to his benefit. The lilies trembled in his hands. Then came the excuses, the tears, the heartfelt moans of misunderstanding. But Vivian had already painted her piece. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "This isn't a case to be debated. It's a boundary. I've nothing to give you. Not anymore." His expression tightened. "You can't cut your own family out forever." "No," she replied. "But I can choose where I'm respected. And that choice doesn't include you for now." She left him in the lobby. The lilies stayed where he dropped them, and Vivian coached her art class that night like nothing had happened, because for the first time in a long time, nothing had. She was free. Vivian didn't feel victorious after David left Oakwood's lobby. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't strong in the way people imagined stout, fists clenched. No, her strength was quiet, steady, like roots beneath an old oak underground, unseen, but anchoring everything from collapse. She spent the evening painting a small piece titled Weightless. It was a soft wash of color sky blues and pale yellows blending toward a white horizon. There was no subject in it. 'Twas space. Breath dot, it was hers. Around her, life quietly embraced her newest version. Milo's began stopping by Oakwood to bring her pastries he half succeeded in making. She taught him how to flavor with lemon peel instead of sugar. He taught her how to play chess badly, but patiently. Their routine was simple: Wednesdays at the dance hall, Sundays under the sycamore tree outside her apartment with Serbian coffee and paper cups. He didn't press for labels. She didn't pretend to be unafraid. That was their unspoken agreement. No games. Many of the residents took notice. "I see you've lit up again," Elaine remarked during yoga, pointing to the glow behind Vivian's eyes. Vivian smiled. "Maybe I just remembered who I am." Evening, during a poetry reading in the lounge, a young woman named Maria approached her. She was a volunteer from the community library, barely in her 20s. With wide dark eyes and chipped black nail polish. "Your watercolors are in the hallway gallery, right?" she asked shyly. "There's something ... I don't know." "Powerful about them?" Vivian blinked. "Thank you." Maria hesitated. "They don't feel like old lady art. They feel like survival." Vivian let that sink in. Survival is not always angels and anthems. Sometimes it's tea on an empty morning. The courage to forward your mail. The stillness of walking away from someone you once rocked to sleep. "You know," Vivian said softly, "art is never about age. It's about what we're finally able to name." The two sat together quietly for the rest of the reading. And that moment was the beginning of another new ripple in Vivian's life. Mentorship. Maria began visiting her studio every Saturday. She asked questions about brush techniques, color layering, how to paint light. But mostly, she just sat nearby, trying to understand life through Vivian's eyes. "I never knew my grandmother," she confessed one day. "But if she were like you, I think I missed a lot." Vivian smiled sadly. "I hope one day someone says the same thing about you." Their connection was simple, healing in both directions. Vivian, who had lost belief in family, began to find fragments of it in strangers, not in bloodlines. But in presence, it wasn't just Ria. Others in the community reached out in ways she'd never anticipated. A retired Marine named Sam began bringing her coffee after his morning walks. An older woman named Pauline asked if they could start a weekly art critique group. Vivian often found herself invited to dinners, walks, theater, rehearsals. People saw her, really saw her. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's grandmother, just Vivian. That was new, and perhaps most miraculous of all, she began sleeping through the night again. No more waking in the dark. Haunted by the weight of unspoken pain, no more tiptoeing around phone calls she dreaded answering no. More shame over trusting the wrong people. Her piece was not loud. It wasn't explosive, cinematic, or structured like closure in a novel. It was the slow unfolding of light from a darkened room. Soft, steady, and absolutely hers. And yet, healing does not erase memory. One afternoon, as she sorted through a drawer of old letters and unsorted photos, she found a Polaroid of David at age 7. He was grinning, gap-toothed, clutching a toy car she remembered buying with her last teaching bonus. That year, her throat tightened. She didn't hate him. She simply didn't trust him. That's the brutal complexity. No one warns you about love. Doesn't dissolve with betrayal. It sits beneath it. It's quiet and confused. Still hoping for different possibilities. Vivian framed the photo not in reverence, but as a monument to what had been real. Once, she placed it beside a new photo. Her and Milos laughing at the community fair. Her hair windswept and cheeks flushed. Like she was 20 again. 2 timelines, 2 truths, 1 life. Another month passed. Then David didn't call again. Or did Natalie? Not even Iris, who once texted midday selfies and coffee orders for help with urgent little emergencies. Their silence, Vivian realized, was not punishment. It was confirmation. They weren't angry because she'd misunderstood them. They were angry because she'd stopped playing her part. That gave her strength. One Friday, she stood in front of her mirror tying a silk scarf, preparing for a dinner and greetings event in the community library. When a familiar knock sounded at the door, it was Maria, nose red from cold, eyes bright. "I got accepted into the Art Foundation program," she blurted excitedly. "Full scholarship." "They looked at my portfolio, they loved it, and I said your name in the interview." Vivian's eyes widened. "Maria, that's wonderful. I couldn't have done this without you." Vivian pulled her into a hug, the kind only women give when they know how rare it is to be genuinely seen and helped without agenda. That night, at the event, Maria stood and presented one of her paintings in public for the first time, abstract. Swirl of colors titled Awakening. She dedicated it, trembling, to the woman who reminded me that starting over is not weakness, but an art form. Vivian sat in the front row, heart stitched between pride and awe, and something else to gratitude. Gratitude for everything, even the pain. Because without the betrayal, without the humbling ache of trust broken and the long road back to herself, she wouldn't have created this new life. Its continuum of purpose, of honesty, of self-recognition, and something shifted inside her. She no longer feared time passing because every day now felt fully lived, fully hers. At 78. Vivian was not waiting for a rescue, nor was she clinging to scripted roles or expectations. She had become the writer of her story, her days, her second act, and she wasn't finished, not even close. No one warned Vivian that healing could be joyful, not just peaceful, or stable, or tolerable, but actually joyful. It began in small, uncontrolled moments, unexpected laughter with Milos over a burnt peach cobbler, a spontaneous late-night walk under the moonlight, the sound of her favorite Chopin piece drifting from another resident's open window, and that feeling, the one she thought died, with Hector emerged again. Happiness without permission. One morning, she stepped outside early, coffee in hand, to find dews still fresh on the grass. The air was crisp and sweet. The silence held like a small symphony before the world woke. She breathed it in fully and realized she had arrived. She wasn't passing time anymore. She was living it. Vivian began to join more activities at Oakwood, things she once dismissed as not for me. Tai Chi, writing circles, Italian movies with broken subtitles. She laughed more easily, made more friends. At the weekly book club, someone suggested they read a new release on late in life reinvention. It was a memoir by a woman who had left a toxic marriage at 70 and moved to Spain. Vivian eagerly devoured it in 2 nights. During the club meeting, while others debated the author's decisions, Vivian found herself speaking up. "We often call It's bravery when a young person wants to begin again. We call it foolish when we're older. But what's really foolish, she said, voice calm but unwavering, is believing that becoming yourself has a deadline. There was a long pause, then murmurs of agreement. Elaine looked at her with soft admiration. Sam nodded. Even Pauline put her hand over Vivian's and whispered, I needed to hear that. Vivian wasn't just healing, she was inspiring, without trying to be, simply by being fully, entirely herself. More than once, people asked her to speak at events. Tell your story, they pleaded. The one about your son, about starting over. But Vivian never framed it that way. This isn't a story about what I lost, she told them gently. It's about what I stopped giving to people who didn't deserve it. And they understood. Still, parts of the past found ways to linger. Some stories don't stay buried. They tap quietly from the other side of a closed door. It happened on a rainy Thursday. It's almost a year since the phone call. Vivian was painting by the window. When the front desk called her room, there's a visitor asking to speak with you. A young woman, Iris. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, her hands held the brush midair. Then, steady, she dipped it back into the water glass and answered, Tell her I'll meet her in the garden. When she stepped outside, the rain had thinned to mist. Iris sat on a bench beneath the arbor. She looked different, older, tired, wearing less makeup than usual. Her once perfect nails were uneven, her laptop bag soaked near her feet. For the first time in a long while, Vivian saw her not as an enemy, but as a scared girl playing adult games too early. Hi, Grandma, Iris said, quickly standing. Her voice cracked. Vivian said nothing, just waited. I wanted to come sooner. I just didn't know how. Still, Vivian said nothing. Her gaze was clear, but not cruel. I was wrong, Iris said finally. We were all wrong. I don't have an excuse. Look, David's angry, like really angry, but I'm not here because of him, okay? Vivian tilted her head, waiting for the truth beneath the monologue. I'm here because I miss you, Iris admitted. Because, for the past few months, every time I messed up, I kept wishing I could call you. Not Mom, you. That cracked Vivian? Felt it. You were the one who helped me write my college application essay, Iris continued. The one who came to my school exhibits. School taught me what a real apology sounds like. Is that what this is? Vivian asked gently. A real one. Iris's eyes filled. I know I don't deserve another chance. Maybe I never will. But even if it's just hearing your voice once more, I needed to say, I'm sorry. For using you. For taking your love and turning it into leverage. Vivian was quiet for a moment. It matters, she said finally. That you came here. That you said all of this. Iris nodded, shoulders shaking. But, Vivian continued, her voice firm. One moment of truth doesn't rebuild a broken bridge. That takes more. That takes time. That takes proof. I'll do whatever you ask, Iris said. I don't want your money. I don't care if you never forgive me. I want to be better. I don't know how without you. Vivian felt that ache again, the complicated one. The love that lingers beneath betrayal. The piece of her that still wanted this young woman to grow into someone kind. So she pulled a folded card from her coat pocket. Inside it was a simple sentence. Leave things better than you found them. It was a mantra she kept on her wall. One Hector used to say after every home project. Fixing a fence, mending a seam, putting the world back together one small act at a time. Start here, Vivian said, handing her the card. I don't need a promise, I need consistency. Iris cradled the card like it was a lifeline. I'll try. Vivian didn't promise anything in return, but she walked her back to the lobby, hugged her, lightly. Like a bookmark in a story not yet finished. Later that night, she told Milos everything. Do you regret opening the door? He asked carefully. She shook her head, no, because boundaries. Don't close your heart. They just surround it. He smiled and kissed the top of her head. And that heart, Vivian, It's the bravest thing I've ever met. The most profound change is not the one that others notice first. It's what happens when you wake up, when you open your eyes and, for a second, forget who they expected you to be. And in the space of that forgetfulness, something real is born. Vivian woke up now with a light gratitude in her chest, not as someone who had forgotten the pain, but as someone who had learned not to be defined by it. She still painted every day, but the paintings changed. Before, her watercolors had depicted landscapes, soft fields, treetops, shadows reflected in lakes. Now they were portraits, not of faces, but of emotions. Loneliness painted in shades of whitish blue. Acceptance in soft golds against a stormy backdrop. Entire series she secretly called The Art of Starting Over. She was invited to exhibit at the Oakwood Cultural Center. It was small, cozy, and had lighting that favored every trace of feeling. On the night of the exhibition, the room was full. Milos at her side, Maria in front, smiling like a proud daughter, curious residents admiring the works with teary eyes. She didn't say much, just what was necessary. All of these paintings have one thing in common, she said, looking out at the audience. They were painted by a woman who thought her story was over. Respectful silence, and found out she was just starting over. The applause came not as euphoria, but as a collective hug. Genuine, heartfelt. That night, Vivian walked with Milos back to the apartment, hand in hand. "Do you think you still have enough dreams left in you for one more trip?" he asked, smiling discreetly. She arched an eyebrow. "It depends." "Where are we going?" "How about Italy?" he said. "My daughter lives there now. We could stay in Florence for a while. Breathe in the art, eat pasta, see the world with new eyes." She did not respond immediately. "Because I was in no hurry. Because now, saying yes was an act of presence, not escape." She slowly squeezed his hand. "Yes, but only if I can bring my brushes." They both laughed. That was what surprised Vivian the most lately. How life, even in old age, could still be light. Making travel plans, feeling butterflies in your stomach. Making plans for tomorrow, ignoring the statistics. A week later, she received a letter, handwritten, from Iris. It said she had started nursing school. That she was working part-time caring for the elderly. That every Friday she left flowers at nursing homes with notes saying, "You matter." At the end of the note, a sentence, "I still have a lot to prove. But thanks to you, I know it's worth trying." Vivian read the letter more than once, but he didn't cry. She smiled. Because sometimes forgiveness is not a moment, but a process. And affection, even when hurt, can reinvent itself as long as it is watered with truth. That same day, Xenia called, saying she wanted to visit her before the trip. "Are they paying for this? These emotional arts?" Xenia teased in her dry, adorable tone. Vivian laughed, paying with compliments and cheap champagne. Better than paying with contempt. "I agree." Xenia arrived as usual, commenting on the traffic, praising the aroma of the house, criticizing the pillows. But that night, over a plate of very well-seasoned frozen ravioli, the two talked about fear, something that old age rarely allows out loud. "Aren't you afraid of dying in another country?" Xenia asked. Vivian replied without hesitation, "No. What I'm afraid of is dying here, without having experienced the world beyond my memories." Xenia nodded. "You were always the brave one among us," she said. Vivian thought for a few seconds. "No, I was just the one who got tired before accepting unhappiness as a habit." After Xenia left, she packed her bags, slowly, carefully, choosing clothes that hugged, not exclaimed. Fabric brushes, a new notebook, a photo of her and Hector, not to carry pain, but to remind her of the source of her strength as she closed. The main zipper, she realized, she was leaving, yes, but none of the luggage was heavier than before, because now she fit into her own life on the morning of the trip. Residents gathered in the courtyard to say goodbye. She didn't expect so much affection. Cards, letters, long hugs. Maria crying like a granddaughter. Elaine saying she would take care of the community garden. Sam, firm as ever, come back and tell us what it's like to paint from the top of an Italian hill. Vivian smiled. Or maybe I'll just send the paintings. She climbed into the van with Milo's by her side. The driver put the bags in. When the door closed, she looked out the window and said, without realizing she had spoken out loud, 70-8. And only now do I understand what it means to live lightly. Milo's held his hand, and the best thing is that we still have time. Life has a quiet, unexpected way of returning us not to what we were, but to what we once dreamed of becoming and put off until later. Vivian knew that now. Not from the words of others, but from the way her own breathing became lighter. How? Waking was no longer an effort. And how even at 78, the future still had a flavor. She and Milo's returned from Florence in late autumn. The wind in Oakwood was cooler, the trees golden, the streets quiet. Still, the place felt more welcoming than ever. Perhaps because this time Vivian was packing less pain and more peace. The trip had left its sweet scars. Her notebooks were filled with watercolors of Italian windows, open markets, seagulls on the Arno, involuntary self-portraits painted in shades of freedom. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to keep it all to herself. She wanted to share. Let's do a new exhibition, Elaine said, as soon as she saw her again. People have missed you. Vivian did not hesitate. He called the new series Invisible Horizons. They were not paintings of foreign landscapes, but internal portraits of new beginnings, maturation, choice. Each work had hidden, among the colors, a simple phrase written discreetly in the lower corner. Me, finally. And people noticed. On the night of the gallery's opening, the hall was packed. Not like before the first show, when people were curious about the talented lady who had been through something difficult. Now, the reason was different. Genuine admiration. Vivian smiled shyly beside her paintings, chatting with old and new friends, while Milo's walked around with glasses of white wine, proud as a boy in love. Maria came to meet him with a small frame in her hands. "Do you remember the first drawing I made of you?" she asked. "I have kept it with care, Kay, and now I want you to have it. It is your signature on me." She handed over the drawing, a simple but vivid sketch. A woman in front of a mirror. The reflection was bigger than she was, stronger, whole. Vivian clutched the paper to her chest. She wiped her eyes. "Thank you, my girl." It was no longer about art, nor about overcoming. It was about legacy. At the end of the week, Vivian received another letter, much simpler than the previous ones. White envelope, shaky writing. Was from Iris. "Grandma, I've started working full-time at a nursing home. I chose this path because every day I'm reminded of the kind of woman you are. Strong, yet kind, rational, yet full of soul. Caring now is my way of giving back what I neglected. I don't apologize yet, but I hope I continue to deserve your memory. With love, Iris." Vivian read the letter in silence. Then she folded it slowly and placed it between the pages of her Florence diary. That night she wrote, "Some regrets don't need punishment. They just need time. Maybe that's a form of love too." The days passed, full of happy little rituals. Coffee by the window, walks with Milo's after dinner, painting classes on Sunday afternoons. Letters exchanged with Maria, flowers left on her doorstep by neighbors, with notes like, "You inspire me to say no to monoxide without guilt." Or, "After meeting you, I started writing letters to myself." Vivian understood now more clearly than ever. Her past pains had become not burdens, but bridges. Bridge to other women who were also used, who also grew old feeling invisible, who also learned too late to set limits, to say enough, to choose themselves, even when that meant cutting ties with blood. But preserving their skin. One November afternoon, at the end of a discussion in the Oakwood Library, Vivian stood to speak. There was no paper or speech, just her, I am Vivian Harmon. She said, I am 78 years old. I have been a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and I have also been forgotten, betrayed, manipulated. Silence, and she continued, but today, I am an artist, a mentor, a traveler, and, above all, a whole woman. I used to think that true love came from the recognition of others. Now, I know that the first love, the one that changes everything, is the love for yourself. And no, that is not selfishness. It is reconnection. A timid applause rose and spread like a wave. Vivian smiled with dignity. When he returned home that night, he placed a new quote in the frame on his desk, replacing an old quote from Hector. It's not enough to survive. You have to belong to yourself every day. In the months that followed, Vivian became a silent beacon for many residents. Young women came to her for advice. Others simply came to sit in silence and collect her energy. She offered tea and listening, and he would hand out, when necessary, a metaphorical mirror. What are you waiting for to put yourself at the center of your own story? On the last day of the year, she wrote in her diary, it took me 78 years to understand that it's not about age or about the time I have left. It's about not wasting another moment trying to be accepted by the wrong people. And below, today, I accept myself. If you've followed Vivian's story this far and it touched something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, comment. Subscribe for more stories that celebrate the invisible strength of so many women. And if you are over 60, 70, 80, know this. Your new beginning can start now. You are not alone. You are enough. And whatever you experience from now on will be by choice. As Vivian said, at 78, I am finally living for myself. Painting my days with the colors of my own choosing.